In this episode of the Project Management Podcast, you'll see how organizations without a PMO can be effective by tracking basic metrics.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I'm Cornelius Fichtner. We are coming to you live from the dazzling 2018 PMI Global Conference here in Chicago. With me right now, sitting here in the hallway, is Jen Paff. Hello, Jen.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you are welcome. Good afternoon. How are things going for you at this Congress?
They're fantastic. It's great to be here.
And you've had your presentation yesterday, is that right?
That's right. Yep. I was on yesterday afternoon.
And how was it for you, standing in front of all of these wonderful project managers, excited?
It was fantastic. It was well received. It's fun to be here, and I'm glad to be a part of the presentation group.
All right. The title of your presentation is When the Organization Thinks They're Running Too Fast to Use Project Management. What's the story behind this? There's got to be something, right? A company that you worked for where they thought, we don't need no stinking project management.
Right. You know, before we even get started, maybe I should even go back a little bit and say that I am just so thrilled to be a part of your podcast, thrilled that you asked me to be a part of your program. I should say that a number of years ago when I was going to learn some new technologies and new techniques, that the first place I reached before I went to a book or to the internet, I looked to listen to some of your podcasts to get some new information. And you're still a part of my podcast list. So
thank you
for asking me to be a part of your program. To answer your question, I'm with a company that many of you may have heard of, with Domino's Pizza. We're in just a tremendous organizational growth period. We just became the number one pizza company in America. And with that, one of the things that comes along with that growth is this balance between process and innovation and speed to market. So as we're managing our projects, we're looking at, how do we make sure we get projects and products out the door quickly? And so how does that speed to market impact or work with the way we're working on our process and projects? And that's very different than a lot of the companies that I've worked in before that were in a declining growth kind of market. So as I was thinking about how could other team members, what would their interests be, I thought that might be something I could share.
Right. So let me see if I got this right. Because you are so successful, things are speeding up to the point where project management is no longer regarded as a necessity?
So let me be careful as I share that. I don't want to scare anybody. We certainly have quality metrics. We have QA involved throughout the cycle of our projects. But we want to be careful that process doesn't get in the way of innovation.
Okay.
And that's something that I think we talk about. And what's important for us is getting things to our customers very quickly, getting things out to market so that we can stay on top of our technology. And so there's that fine balance. And that's what the topic was about. It's what is the right amount of project management for a team. And if an organization doesn't have a PMO and you're this experienced project manager, is that anything you need to be nervous about? Or can you find that right place for you and your career in that organization? And my suggestion is absolutely. There are definitely places, if you don't have a PMO, where you can be incredibly successful. You can take your career to just places you hadn't even thought about, like we have, and really expand your career. So
how much project management and process do you then currently have?
Okay, so this is going to be kind of the consultant answer, right? It depends.
It depends, yes, okay.
Do we want to go somewhere with that? Or so it does depend. And one of the things that we talked about was there's definitely the traditional PMO structure, and then there's the non-traditional PMO structure. So in your traditional PMO structure, you're going to have the, say, formal project review process where you would have templates, have a structured process, project register where you would list all of your projects, perhaps a very formal methodology, a team of PMs, and then you're going to have, in a contrasting way, a non-traditional PMO structure, which would be what we're working with. Neither is right or wrong, but it's another way to get your projects done, which I'm suggesting can be very successful, especially when you have folks who have credentials, whether it's your CAPMs, your PMPs, your experienced project managers, can bring those kinds of experiences to help that non-traditional structure, non-PMO organization be incredibly successful, and sometimes a very creative format. In that non-traditional structure, they can have those checks and balances by potentially having close customer contact in an open office. We prioritize projects, but not in that necessarily project register format. We're allocating our resources by business unit. So there's a lot of things that happen, but in just a different, less structured format. And that fluid format is what I am suggesting helps us continue to be successful in moving things along. I'm not suggesting there's no format or it's the wild, wild west. I'm suggesting a little less structure allows us to move quickly.
Mm-hmm. And who then keeps the oversight over everything that's going on? Because, in a traditional PMO, you have an annual plan. These are the projects we're going to be working on. Somehow, that sort of planning still has to happen somewhere.
Yes.
People have to think about saying, okay, out of these 5 projects, which ones are we actually going to do and tackle?
Sure. No, so you're absolutely right. And it isn't a free-for-all. We certainly are a very large organization. We do have a way to capture our projects. They are reporting. Our CIO has an absolute oversight of all of the projects that are happening. There is a budget for all of our large projects. So all of that tracking does still happen. And as I mentioned, QA is involved in all of our large projects. It isn't any kind of a chaotic process at all. But it is a slightly looser process. And one of the things we did talk about yesterday as well, particularly related to methodologies, it is definitely a mixture of a hybrid of many different types of methodologies, and sometimes within the same project. And we can go there if you'd like, but that is another reason I think it has remained so successful, especially of late.
Mm-hmm. So what are the mixes, the hybrids that you're using?
Sure. Some of the things that we see particularly lately are the mixture of Agile and Waterfall. Mm-hmm. And then one of the things, and also just a little bit of everything else. So I have a large project right now in our payments area, which is what I manage. I manage what's called payment strategy. And what that means is if you go into a Domino's and you go to buy a pizza, whether it's in a store or online, and it works, that means my team is doing their job.
Right.
And if it doesn't, they'll call our call center, which is my other team, so we'll hear about it.
And I'm very happy that we're mentioning this right now, because there may have been some listeners out there who were thinking, wait, you're trying to get the pizzas faster to the customer? That's not what we're talking about, right? Your customers are not necessarily the customers that buy the pizza, but your customers can also be other departments within your organization, right?
Right. So in this payment strategy format, from a technology standpoint, we have a number of, we're going to call them technical delivery managers, TDMs, our IT team members. We have, in this particular project, I have one TDM who's running an Agile part of my project. He's going to be creating stories, and he's going to have deliverables or outputs that will be given to another technical delivery manager. She's running Waterfall. This is all the same project. I have another technical manager. He's probably going to give us a list of stuff that he wants in the project. And that list of stuff will probably be in an email. And so all of those 3 technical project managers will be giving their outputs to a program manager, and we'll have a master project schedule. And so, again, back to the point of it isn't the wild, wild west. We will be having regular meetings with all of our technical project managers. We have once a week a regular project meeting, meaning that we have QA, we have members of architecture, we have members of dev, we have members from each of the teams involved in that meeting. But that project plan that will be created by our overall program manager will be a mix of agile and hybrid mix of waterfall and then the stuff from the other project manager. And we'll review that, but it isn't going to follow a particular methodology, and it'll flex a little bit. And I would say that if you asked another director from another team what his or her project plan looked like, it would probably be very different than what our project plan looked like. And that would be fine.
I was just going to say, is that a bad thing?
Not at all. I think that's, and I also think that given that ability to be flexible and a bit creative is very good for what we're doing. We're doing things that are new. We're doing things that work for our customers, and our customers could be our internal business customers, to your point. Also our end customers. We're trying to get things out to them as quickly as we can, and we're giving them what they're asking for. So that works for us, and I think that our leadership is wanting that, and so we're supporting that. So it allows us to be creative and getting things done quickly.
When somebody new starts in your organization and they are used to more of the PMO oversight structure where things are clearly defined, how many problems do they have to suddenly go, okay, I have a lot more freedom here?
I think that freedom comes in the format of when we are interviewing, at least my team and a lot of the teams from the project side, we certainly look for experience. And having said that we're looking for that experience, sometimes folks will say, well, is there a PMO? If there isn't a PMO. But we do offer opportunities for that information sharing. And in that information sharing aspect, we have a Center of Excellence for our project managers. That Center of Excellence is supported by our leadership from the CIO down. And that Center of Excellence is endorsed in that we have, I'm going to call them standards, but I'm also going to say loose standards, so I'm doing the air quotes thing. So loose in that we have guidelines, we have processes and templates, but those are optional. And so what we talk about in our Center of Excellence is that we give recommendations on projects that have worked, and we say, this is something that has worked in the past and, could be something you'd want to look at. Very similar into the way that in my former life, when I led a global project management office, when we did project reviews, now in our Center of Excellence, we can conduct a project review, but it comes in the format of a junior project manager may bring in his or her project plan and say, I'd like some suggestions. And we have more seasoned project managers who can provide those suggestions. But the Center of Excellence is really a safe place, if you will, where he or she can get those suggestions, get some recommendations, and whether or not he or she takes them is really up to them. So they can get that advice, get those offerings, and then that's up to them if they choose so.
So it's a very free form, a very free flow for the project manager. You are really the queen and the king of your area. You decide how things are going to be done.
Yeah, let me just counter that by saying, a good question came up yesterday that said, well, your dates, how do you know your dates are going to, stay, or can you move your dates around? I would say absolutely not. Once we adhere to a date, so we have requirements, we develop our requirements like you would in any large company. And then once your requirements are set, management would expect us to adhere to those requirements. We keep them, and then we're moving forward, marching to those requirements date. So again, it's not that loose. I don't want someone to think, hey, it's loose over, in terms.
But the how you get there is not necessarily prescriptive.
That's right. And so I think there's enough when you say loose, there's a creativity, or there allows team members to use their subject matter experts that they're bringing their talents from different areas, exactly to your point. And then, we'll lock in dates after team members have the time to exercise those talents. And then, yes, we lock in the dates, and then we're all marching to those specific dates.
How is anybody keeping the big picture over all of this?
For each of the individual project plans, as we mentioned, so our program manager, we're reporting on those weekly, and those are going up those leadership channels that we talked about. So those are being reported in pretty standard ways. So
red, green, yellow type of an approach,
absolutely.
Regular status reports that you have to send in.
Exactly. And to your point, I think simple is better. We try to use, as opposed to really complicated types of metric charts, we're focusing on things like project end date, project start and end date, and then if there's a variance, our internal labor, external labor costs, and any variances, and major milestones. And then if we're off any of those major metrics, then we certainly have the data that will support, what are the things we need to dig into.
How do you feel as a project manager working in an environment like that? Do you feel empowered? Do you feel that you're not being supported? Where do you land here?
I think for project management, so let me answer your question directly. It's fantastic.
It sounds almost like a little bit of slice of heaven there.
I think for project managers that like the guardrails and like the boundaries, it can be a little nerve-wracking at first. If you like to have the methodology that says I go from A to B to C, we don't necessarily have that. If you're an experienced project manager who's very comfortable with what you need to do and who can jump into a project and say, this is going well, you're a problem solver, it's that kind of space. And it's exciting. It's new technology. It's bleeding edge. It's people who are working very hard and trying new things. But the answer isn't always laid out in front of us. And so, we're working with team members. It's an open office environment. We'll walk down and talk to people and say, look, we got to have a meeting right away. Let's figure this out together. And it's very collaborative, which is exciting, but it isn't always linear. And here's exactly how we do it. So that's exciting to a lot of people. And I think we're getting a lot of great things done very quickly. But the answer isn't always A, B, C. Sometimes it's A, C, B, and we got there. But we get there together, which for us is a lot of fun.
Would the term hero project manager be applicable?
I don't think so. Not in this case. We work together a lot. The team members definitely feel as if it's a group project, that the team is successful as a team. So I don't really see that in our organization.
How well do you feel it is working overall?
I think it's working successfully. I think if you talk to our business, they would say the same thing. It feels like in the environment, when you talk to folks about the culture of the organization, it feels like it's working. When you walk around, there's an energy that feels different, at least for me, compared to some of the cultures I've been in before. Our CIO, he likes to talk about Domino's being a technology company that makes pizza, which, it's at first it's sort of funny, and then you think, you're right.
So I'm sitting here scratching my head, trying to wrap my head around what it is you're doing and how you're doing it. How was the energy that you had during the presentation yesterday? Did you feel that, some people got it and some people were just going wide-eyed, going, what on earth are these people doing?
I think that people really did get it. Folks stayed for about 15 minutes after and were still asking questions. I had folks stopping me at dinner and at breakfast saying, thanks, I really enjoyed your presentation. I think there's a lot of folks that maybe like myself had that expectation when they were going from analyst to project manager to senior project manager that I'm going to be in a PMO and this is what I'll do. I certainly did. I led a PMO and I thought I'll lead my next PMO and that's what I'll do. And then when there wasn't a PMO, I thought, or when I went to an organization I didn't think would have a PMO, I wasn't sure if that how would that work? And so I think there's a lot of organizations that either don't have a PMO, maybe they're just starting one up and it's not quite finished. That came up a lot in the discussion was my PMO is new, I'm not really sure. Or there just isn't one for whatever reason. The technology is moving too fast, or there's not going to be one for any number of reasons. And I don't think there has to be a PMO to have an environment, whether it's tech or it's healthcare or even auto, to have an environment be wildly successful. I think if you have the right talent, if you've got people that either are credentialed or come with good talent and background, you can be tremendously successful.
Out of the questions that you got from your audience, what surprised you most?
I think folks were asking fantastic questions. I think one of the ones that said, well, I have team members mostly from the business who aren't sure what they should be doing. It wasn't that surprising because I've had that same question. And so one of the things we did talk about in the presentation was creating documentation, not a lot, just a little, where like a RACI, but not calling it a RACI, a roles and responsibilities document, so that your team members know what they're doing. Your team members on the business side will know what they're doing. And one of the things we also talk about during the presentation was making sure that you create things that are in English, not in project language, so that everybody knows what is happening and it doesn't sound like you're creating extra project things. And so for that question, what we talked about was making a roles document, a responsibility document, so that I know what I'm doing and the business knows what they're doing. And who wouldn't want to sign up for that? Because I want to know what I'm supposed to do and you want to know what you're supposed to do, and let's just write it out. But we don't have to call it something fancy, and especially not if it's going to sound like it's going to take you a long time. So we'll just write out a responsibility document and agree to it. And most of us in the room were agreeing to, well, that sounds like a good idea.
Is there a conflict, any kind of conflict growing within your organization between the various project managers and their teams in regards to, we're using this kind of an approach and it works really well, you don't, you should change? And is anything like that appearing?
I'm shaking my head in the no range. I almost think it's the opposite. I think that what this does allow us to do is we have some folks that are great at Agile. And speaking of the project that I'm working on right now, one of the larger projects, they don't want to change the things they're doing because it's working very well for them. The folks that are working on the waterfall, and it's mostly waterfall, they don't want to change that because that happens to be working very well for them too. I've got the folks that are just giving me the input of the stuff, and I'm joking around a little bit because they're just going to send me some things that I have to do. And so what this allows, the approach that we're talking about, is everyone can do what they're just best at. And so we're not asking anyone to conform to things that are different. We're not asking anyone to sign up for anything or do extra documentation. We're taking the things that people are best at and allowing them to continue doing those things. And I think that's what this is best at, is kind of taking the best of both worlds, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see room for improvement?
We can't always predict what's going to happen with technology. So allowing this to continue to evolve will, I think, allow that improvement by not putting a cap on it, by not saying it has to have these rules or guidelines. As we get new project managers in, I know some of them are saying, well, we better have some standards, right? Because as we get bigger, we need to have a couple of standards. I think we have to be somewhat careful of that because what we're doing right now is working. So, there's just we're going to have to balance this as we go forward. We may have to have some standards as we get a little bit bigger. But then again, what we're doing right now seems to be working.
Yeah. One thing that I'm noticing is that I'm having a hard time really getting what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think it may also be rather difficult for you to explain how things really work on a day-to-day basis and what you do and what kind of processes you follow and what project management approaches you need. This is very hard to document and explain to people. How long does it take somebody new who comes in to really get it?
Well, so each project is going to be different.
Yeah.
So, to say what we're doing is different than someone else's project. And so I wouldn't document exactly what we're doing and suggest that it's the same as someone else's project. So we have a very large IT department. So I wouldn't try to suggest that what we're doing is the same as someone else's project.
Does it confuse or frustrate your customers? Because many customers, and I'm not talking about the final customers at the end, but, the stores, other departments that, I've just finished a project with this group over here. This is how they did it. Now you're coming here and you're completely changing the rules and we have to do this project completely differently.
We haven't seen that, so at least with my group. So we're in one building. We're working with somewhat similar customers. So we're working with what we might call our builder brand group, which would be like our marketing department. So we have similar types of customers internally, and it's, I would say, small enough but big enough that when we're running repeatable types of projects, it's not that we're running things that are entirely different each time. So we know our customers, our internal customers. We have trust and relationships with those internal customers that I think one of the things that has been a very nice effect of this type of environment is that we build that very quickly in this type of environment. So I think that's been a bonus of this type of thing. Mm-hmm. We're sitting right next to them. We can ask them what they think. We walk over to their desk. So I haven't seen that it's been an issue.
How would you suggest that our listeners here on the podcast can take ideas from how you're doing it and apply it in their own environment?
I think each organization has to decide how much rigor and process is right for their organization. I don't think there's a right and a wrong. I think that's the big takeaway. I don't think, there's a strict application of this is the right amount of project process for an organization. Certainly the reason that I felt like this was a topic for discussion was that if you're an experienced project manager and you find yourself in an organization without a PMO, there are tremendous opportunities for you and ways to be successful. I would also say that if you're in an organization and you have lots of rigor and there are opportunities to perhaps relax some of them, you may find that your project managers may have some opportunities for increased creativity, for increased productivity because of the things that they're able to do on their own by exploring new things, which is what we definitely do. Because we don't have a prescribed way of doing some things, it does allow us to do things by having some additional discussions, by saying, hey, do you think this will work? By saying, hey, if you talk to someone else, let's try it this way. Okay, let's try it that way. And I think those kinds of discussions are things that promote new ideas and new ways of doing things, which is what, new technology can sometimes be all about, and which is why a lot of us are so excited to be in the organization we're in.
Everything seems fluid, little structure, a little bit of guidance, but not prescriptive. Who keeps everything together and flowing?
We certainly have reporting structures and provide updates. There is a way that we're providing summaries of where our projects are monthly. So it is not the wild, wild west. And then we all report into vice presidents and our CIO, who definitely knows where all of our projects are. So our CIO is very clear on where our projects are from a status standpoint. So.
All right. At the end of your presentation yesterday, when the people stood up and walked out, what was the number one thing? If you forget anything that Jen has just told you, but this is the one thing that you should really take home with you. What was that one thing?
That you can be successful whether your organization has a PMO or not, and definitely think about ways that with your background, how can you walk into your organization and look for new ways to be successful.
Thank you so much for your time, Jen.
Thank you so much.